Today on Locked On Red Wings, we hand out final season grades to Filip Zadina, Dominik Kubalik, and Olli Maatta.
You're Locked On Red Wings, your daily podcast on the Detroit Red Wings. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to the Locked On Red Wings podcast. We are your hosts, Brian Fisher and Scotty Bentley. I'm a podcast producer for the Daily J, a WWJ News Radio podcast with Scotty as a host over at Locked On Tigers, as well as a freelance journalist for the Detroit News. And today, guys, we are going to continue our conversation on the player grades. But before we get to that, I got to let you guys know that today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. And Scotty, today we're going to talk about two Czech players and a defenseman. That'll be Filip Zadina, Dominik Kubalik, and Olli Maatta. Not in that particular order, but those are the three guys we're going to get to. And just to refresh everyone, I feel like I should do this at the start of every episode, Scotty, because not everyone listens to every episode in consecutive order. When we hand out our player grades, it's going to be one, pretty arbitrary, right? Our grades don't really mean a whole lot. They're just how we felt the player performed that season. And it's based on our expectations going into the year for that individual player. So if we give, hypothetically, we were to give like Michael Rasmussen an A, that's not the same A as Dylan Larkin received on Monday's episode. So every letter grade is based on the expectations and whether or not they exceeded those expectations for that individual player and our expectations of them. So just want to keep that out there for if you guys decide you disagree, you know that that's why we gave that player that particular grade. And if you guys disagree, or if you agree, either way, let us know your grades for these particular players in the comments. We'd love to hear it. Scotty, the first player we're going to talk about in today's episode is the very polarizing Filip Zadina. He played 30 games this season, had a cumulative 7 points, 3 goals, and 4 assists. Beat up all year long. He missed a huge chunk of the season with a broken leg and then came back. Didn't put up numbers, but I say played pretty dang good defensively. But then got hurt again. His season was over. Kid can't seem to catch a break. Has yet to play a full NHL season in his now 5 full seasons in the NHL. He had 2 COVID-shortened years. 1 year last year, he missed time due to injury, and this time he missed time due to injury twice. When talking about Filip Zadina, Scotty, what kind of grade are you giving him?
Man, throwing it to me first that's brutal. It is a really fascinating conversation. I think all three of these are fascinating conversations. Like I know that we can't like fit all of this, in a thumbnail or anything to kind of like advertise this episode, but like I genuinely think that despite not having, like an S tier, like Larkin caliber, like person in this episode, I think all three of these are really, really intriguing and interesting debates. And obviously Zadina, as you said, is always going to be pretty polarizing. The thing with him is just expectations since draft night have been put the puck in the back of the net, and that is not who he is. And I think for a lot of us, every game that goes by, I think more and more people realize that may never be what he is. And that, although doesn't mean that he didn't still play productive hockey. He was really good in the neutral zone and really a really solid defensive forward, which this team very much needs. And so it's weird when talking about expectations versus reality when he played decent hockey, but not the style that was expected. And certainly, I don't think came anywhere close to our preseason like goal total prediction for him. Now, obviously, he was hurt for a lot of it, but even like prorating it would have come nowhere close to what we thought he was going to accomplish as far as goal scoring and just point production, period. So it's really, really It's difficult. I think difficult is the word.
He was
I'm
on
gonna
pace for
go.
19 points, by the way.
What'd you say?
He was on pace for 19 points across
Right.
an 82 game season.
Right. Yeah. Like, like that's not great. But again, it's tough because I don't think at this point I don't think he's ever going to be the really high point total guy. Fill the goal player that we thought we were getting on draft night. So it makes it weird. I think I'm gonna go with C. C.
Wow, that's way more forgiving than I am going to be.
I was debating between a C and a C minus, honestly.
I mean, if I'm going to be honest,
How many games did he play?
30. But in that 30 games, because we're not gonna fault him for his injuries, right?
No, I agree with that.
But we talk about expectations, right? And the expectation both of us had was for him to uptick his production from last season. And
yeah,
so
he did not even come anywhere close to doing that.
yeah, last year he had 24 points in 74 games played. I just told you, if you were to prorate his point total for this season when he was healthy, it's 19 points.
Right.
So even across what would have been hypothetically 8 more games, he would have had 5 less points. I mean, I'm going to give him a D, even though I'm a huge Zadina supporter and I love the kid. I'm going to give him a D because he did not live up to our expectations. The only thing, in my opinion, that is saving him from getting an F in those 30 games was the fact that we are getting a vastly different player in a good way than what we thought. He's not living up to that 6th overall hype, but he's turning into probably, maybe, is it too flamboyant, too hot takey to say that he might be the best defensive forward on the team next to Pew Suter? Because if you look at the statistics, and again, 30 games played compared to like other guys playing many more, of the players that we are qualifying for our player grades, so not Taro Hirose and not Elmer Soderblom, he led the team on expected goals for percentage this season, 53.42%. So when he was on the ice, the team as a whole had 53% of the quality shooting attempts versus the opposing team. And he has, I think, the 9th best. Let me refilter this so I get it right. The 6th best on the team. Actually, 5th best if you disqualify. 4th best if you disqualify Bertuzzi and Soderblom. So the 4th best on the team, Corsi for percentage. And he was the best on the team at Corsi for relative and expected goals for percentage relative. So compared to his teammates, when he was on the ice, the team had more shot attempts and quality shot attempts rather than when he's off the ice. So he defensively shut down the other team, and then he helped create opportunities for his teammates, but he just never got rewarded for it. So in my mind, him becoming this, I don't know if this is a flash in the pan defensively for him. I know that was 2 seasons ago. That was something that Jeff Blashill really hammered for him to focus on. But he has turned into this really strong defensive forward. And that's why he's getting a passing grade and a D. Because remember, guys, D is technically a passing grade in the American grading system, at least. But he isn't living up to that expectation that many of us had, in that, we want more scoring out of him. Again, you can't hold the injuries against him, but you prorate that point total, it doesn't look that much better. That being said, Scotty, there is something to be said that maybe next year going forward, we shift our expectations for Filip Zadina, because he does have 2 more years on his contract. Remember, he signed an extension in the offseason. So he's got 2 more years with the Red Wings here. Maybe we shift our expectations away from point totals and more on just the defensive-minded aspect, because he seemed to excel in his 30 games this year at that part of his game.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and yeah, it's that's why it's so difficult, because and that's why I think I'm leaning like that. I feel fine with like my C minus grade, like just because, and maybe it has something to do with the fact that going into the season, I didn't think Filip Zadina was going to put up like a 20 goal season or anything like that. Like so maybe that's just each of us having slightly different expectations about what we thought he was going to accomplish this year. Again, like it certainly was not what any of us expected, either of us, no matter what our expectations were as far as goal score, because he barely scored, he barely produced points. But it's really difficult to grade someone who just completely switched their style of play and like did it well. Like that's almost impossible because if you're comparing to what we thought we were going to get out of him, then like it's like just point production. I think it's comfortably an F. I don't even think it's close. That he failed. That is, if you're just looking at what we thought we were going to get out of him since draft night and every year since draft night, as far as point production goes, it's a bona fide F. It's not even close. But this season, completely changing the style of play. I guess maybe if I'm just going off, if I weigh the point total expectations and the goal total expectations more, then that would drag the grade down for sure. Like I'll kind of concede that for sure. But it's really difficult because he was such a good defensive forward on this hockey team, and when in his new and improved style that he now is, like he did well at that. So it's just a fine line to walk.
And it wasn't just defensively in the defensive zone, like defensively in the offensive zone as well. His
we
forechecking
talked about
game,
the forecheck every time he was healthy.
yeah, great at taking the puck away from opponents, pressuring them to make them cough it up. Like he was excelling at that part of the game, and it seems like he could become a decent play driver, but we just haven't seen it. We haven't seen it on the score sheet, and unfortunately, we can talk about the advanced metrics all we want about how much we love him, but if it's not resulting in points, then is it even worth mentioning?
Sure.
So D for me, C for you.
C minus.
C minus for you. Okay. When we come back, we'll move on and talk about Olli Maatta. But first, I got to talk to you guys today about Gametime. If you guys are sick and tired of the hassle and the struggle of dealing with other ticketing apps when trying to buy tickets to your favorite Red Wings hockey games, or maybe some Tigers baseball, as they now have eclipsed their win total from last April with that 8th win last night, you guys are want to check out Gametime instead. Gametime is the place for last-minute ticket deals. Forget planning months in advance. Gametime has deals on tickets right up to the day of the event. Get exclusive flash deals on tickets for football, basketball, baseball, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. The Gametime guarantee means you'll always get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section and rows for less, Gametime will credit you 110% of the difference. It's the fastest growing ticketing app in the country for a reason. Get images of your seat before you buy so you know exactly what to expect when you arrive. Buy tickets in a matter of seconds, 2 taps, and you're set. Tickets are sent directly to your phone so you never have to dig through your email. Snag the tickets without the stress with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Segment 2, Locked On Red Wings podcast. Scotty and I are doing our player grades, and we're about to move on to Olli Maatta. And Scotty, this season, Olli Maatta had 23 points in 78 games played, which is his highest point total since his 17-18 season with the Pittsburgh Penguins. This is a defense-first kind of guy, so you got a surprising amount of production out of Olli Maatta. But I think with him, it's a little bit of a tale of two seasons, wouldn't you say? He played exceptionally well up until about the moment he got, I would say, pneumonia. You could maybe argue contract extension. But, Scotty, he's an interesting player. Just break it down for me. What do you think Olli Maatta deserves grade-wise?
Well, it's tough because he was, like you said, like if you're going first half, second half, I mean, maybe like law of averages, he just averages out to like around a C, just because like first half, what are you giving him? Like a B plus even? Like legitimately, I mean, in the first 3 months of the season, you're like, okay, we're getting offensive production out of him. He's a solid second line defender on this team. On a good team, he's probably not, but like, he's been solid enough. And the pairing with, like, least we forget, the pairing when him and Hronek were on the line together or on a pairing together was like legitimately one of the best production and like analytically like one of the better pairings in the entire NHL for the first couple of months of the season. Like we were flying high. Like he got off to an incredible start, and then like pretty much all of the calendar year of 2023 was a lot less, if any at all. And like I still support the extension because you need that depth. You need the depth on that side at that. I mean, I'm okay with the extension. And I kind of just want to like law of averages it out to like a C, like maybe a C plus. Maybe we're feeling a little generous. Maybe we do a C plus. I mean, going into the season, if you would have told me that he would have gotten a contract extension and I would have been happy about it, I think that that's probably a win. Like that means that he filled the role that you were trying to get out of him. So like definitely didn't blow anybody away. Wasn't fantastic after American Thanksgiving maybe, but probably I'll go C plus.
Yeah, I would think C plus is probably a fair grade for Olli Maatta. And this is funny too, Scotty, because of things we'll reveal in segment 3 that we talked about in pre-show. But Olli Maatta, through his first 25 games, was a plus 11 with the Detroit Red Wings when he was paired up with, at that time, Filip Hronek. They were one of, metrically, the best defensive pairings in the league.
Yeah,
and we talked about
20 defensive pairings in the entire NHL for like the first several months of the season.
Yeah, and we talked about last week about how sometimes it's that combination of
offense and defense
combining works out, and sometimes it's just the same play style. With the case of Wallman and Seider,
yeah.
Hronek and Maatta were the opposite style players that just gelled together super well, and through those first 25 games, they were the best defensive pairing, while Seider and Sherratt struggled.
Yep.
And then Olli Maatta got pneumonia. And that was after his 25th game. He left. He didn't play from December 6th to December 17th, 11 days off. From there on, from his 26th game of the season through his final 78th game, he was, double check on this one, a minus 20 across the last. So he went from a plus 11 in the first 25 to a minus 20 in the last 53. And he earned his extension. I'm not going to deny that. But it just seems like maybe he was still battling symptoms from that. But after that, this guy who was a defensive stalwart in the defensive zone, but was also surprisingly producing quite a lot of points for the Red Wings, just his game got worse. And so it's like you said, the tale of two seasons. That's why I think C plus is fair. I think expectations for him were for just him to be a depth D-man, help play defensive hockey, and he exceeded at that, even bringing a little bit of offense before he got sick. And then after that, it was just hit and miss more times than hit, it seemed. And he finished the season a little bit weak, but I'm not worried about that. I'm thinking next season we'll probably get what we saw in the first 25 than we saw in the last 53, because he's going to come back fully healthy. So I think C plus is completely fair.
Yeah. I mean, the biggest thing for me, like I said, is honestly just like we gave him an extension, and after game 82 at the end of the season, I'm still happy that we gave him an extension. And so that I think that it's that would fall under no matter by how thin a margin, I think that would fall under the category of exceeding expectations.
Yeah, absolutely. So when we come back, Scotty, we'll talk about our final guy that we have on our docket today, and that is Dominik Kubalik. But first, I got to toss it to break. We don't have a read here. Stay tuned. Segment 3, Lockdown Red Wings.
Smooth.
Segment 3, Lockdown Red Wings podcast. Scotty, we're going to talk about Dominik Kubalik now.
This one's fascinating, man.
He is fascinating.
This is a fascinating conversation.
He is. All right. How do I even set the table for that? He had 45 points in 81 games played this season. When you look at it from that perspective, absolute success for Dominik Kubalik. 1 point shy of his career high with the Chicago Blackhawks his rookie season when he finished as a Calder finalist. He broke his assists high with 25 assists. His previous high was 21. And it was his second highest goal total, 20, 10 shy of his 30 total that he reached in his, again, Calder finalist season. Again, 45 points in 81 games played, 1 point shy of tying his career high. You look at that in a vacuum, absolute success story of Dominik Kubalik. But much like it was with Olli Maatta, it's a tale of two seasons. If you look at his first 25 games with the Detroit Red Wings, just like with Olli Maatta, so I don't know how that happens. He had 25 points in 25 games played, 10 goals and 15 assists.
Point a game player the first, what is that?
25.
Third of the season,
First third of the season, yeah. And he had half of his goal total in the first 25 games of the season. His last, 56 games with the Red Wings this year, he averaged just 20 points. So he had 20 points in his last 56, but 25 in his first 25.
He was under half a game player in his last 56 games, and he was a point a game for the first
25. And it's really tough to, and again, if you want to give two season grades, he's like A+ in the first half.
Yeah, literally a bona fide A+ for the
A+
first
in the first 25 games.
Not even close.
This is a guy you got for 2 years, $2.5 million, like next to nothing by NHL money. And he put up 25 and 25 for you. Fantastic. But then in the second half, I think you saw the Dominik Kubalik that the Chicago Blackhawks decided it wasn't worth giving a qualifying offer to. And when you're grading him overall, again, exceeded expectations. I mean, he gave you over 40 points when you weren't expecting that. I think our expectations for him were like 15 to 20 goals and just nowhere near that amount of assists. I think we were talking in the 30-point range for him. And here he comes out and he crushes that. So I think it's still just because of the overall total. I think you still have to be fair to him and give him, I'm going to give him, Scotty, a B-. I'm going to say B- for Dominik Kubalik for his first season with the Detroit Red Wings. How do you feel?
So, yeah, I am right there with you. I was going back and forth between a B and a B+, actually. So, I don't want to weigh or over factor in like the first third of the season and not the last two thirds of the season.
That's the tough part.
Right. But at the same time, no matter when they came, like that's objectively a huge win. Like you got a for his standards, a career year. Like you got one of the best seasons of his entire career. And I don't think we were expecting anywhere close to that. So yes, the last 2/3 of the season, he was less than half a point a game. Obviously, that's not fantastic production, but in like November, he was playing on the first line and everybody was like, yeah, makes sense. Like he probably should be, right? Like he deserved it. So it's tough. Man, part of me really wants to go B+.
I get it.
It is really difficult, like especially because the less production was the most recent and it's a bigger sample size. I'll go B. I'll go a solid B. But it doesn't matter if you're just doing like a pass fail grade and you're not going to get super intricate like we are. This is objectively a massive passing with flying colors and a massive win for last offseason and for this organization. Like blown out of the water. Absolutely a big win.
Yeah, while you were talking, I was actually thinking, I think I'm going to change mine to a B as well, just because of the fact that, again, if you look at it in a vacuum, it was a massive success. Like, again, I would give it, if this was sparsed out consistently throughout the entire season, I think I'd give this an A. But because it was just front-loaded, because it was so front-loaded, I feel like that's unfair. I feel like you can't do that because we just talked about Olli Maatta. I mean, across the whole season, he looked fine.
How many points did he end with?
Maatta?
No.
Kubalik? 45. One shy of his career high.
So, sure. So 45 over the course of a season is over half a point a game. If he had done that evenly distributed, we'd be talking about this as, again, like a massive success story. And I still think it is. I'm not, maybe not as just because of like you can't ignore you can't ignore the massive drop off after the hot start, and no one expected him to maintain point a game player status. But it was such a dramatic drop off, and then it was really little to at one point no production. He went on a goalless streak for a while there, and I still like play style wise. I think that he really fits into what this bottom six needed. Like last season, this
Well,
is
it
something we
needed
talked about
scoring.
last offseason when we signed him, right? Like last year, we talked so much about how this team, how many times were we screaming, shoot the puck, somebody please shoot the puck. It might not have been on net, but that was never a worry with Dominik Kubalik on the ice, man. He was going to grip it and rip it.
He was a
And
glass cannon, man. Either he got all of it or he got none of it.
right, yeah, exactly. And so I think that he really fit into what this again in like the second half of the year, even despite the production, I still think he fit into what this bottom and at some nights middle six needed on a game to game basis. And yeah, I mean, again, like the production, you got a career year. Going into the season, if we were like, hey, this is exactly how his production is going to be distributed, are you still taking it? Every single person and their mother is still taking it 10 times out of 10.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just, again, with how the last 56 games went, it's you can't give him an
You can't
A,
ignore it.
but
You can't.
it's just he, without a doubt, exceeded our expectations this season. And so even though a B almost feels like an insult, it's still a great review of this kid who, came in with something to prove and ended up with 45 points, hitting the 20 goal mark. And until like the last 2 weeks of the season, when David Perron decided to score a ton of goals, he was the second most leading scorer on the Red Wings. So, I mean, this was an experiment by Steve Yzerman that has absolutely worked out through the first year of this contract because, like you said, Scotty, this team, and it still does need scoring, but this team needed a pure goal scorer. And Dominik Kubalik was the closest you signed to a pure goal scorer on the free market that the Red Wings got. So this was a massive win for the Red Wings, massive win for the Dominik Kubalik. And all I hope is that next year he can replicate that production, but keep it consistent across an entire season. I don't need you to do 25 and 25. If you can do 50, if you can do 40 in, what was it, 81 games this season, next season, but do it across like an even amount, like every other game, then we're golden, Dominik.
Yeah, I wouldn't hold my breath. Like I feel like his
He's a goals in
style
bunches.
leads to in like nebs and flows. Like that's what somebody who plays like that and just wants to get in a spot and just unleash as many shots as they can, and who knows how accurate they're going to be. Like that's somebody that is going to go on some heaters where you're like, oh my goodness, this is awesome, and then it's just like a free swinger in baseball. It's like the exact same thing, like to a T, pretty much. Like you're gonna have hot streaks, you're gonna have cold streaks, and you hope that the production in the hot streaks outweighs the minus production. Probably seems too dramatic in this case, but the lack of production during the cold streaks. So
Absolutely. All right, Scotty, do you got any final thoughts on any of these players?
Everyone calm down about my C- to Zadina. I can already hear it, and I don't really want to deal with it. Everybody calm down. Yeah, his production wasn't good. We all admitted that and know that. I think that's it. We ball.
We do ball. We'll be back with a new episode tomorrow with 3 new player grades to give you guys. So stay tuned. Same time, same place. It's your team every day.
Every day.